The sand was cool beneath my feet, the air laced with salt, and the muffled bass of distant music. The beach party was in full swing, a blur of laughter and bonfire flames flickering against the night. I wasn't meant to be there one last reckless summer night before college, crashing a friend-to-be-friends get-together. But something in me had craved the anonymity, the chance to just exist without expectations. That's when I saw him. He stood alone at the edge of the crowd, half in shadow, beer in hand, eyes skimming the horizon like he was waiting for something that would never come. There was an ease in his stillness, a kind of self-possession that stood in contrast to the chaos around him. Tall, lean, tousled, hair falling into eyes that caught the light just enough to make me look again. Asterisk, I didn't mean to approach him. But then I was walking, drink forgotten, drawn by something I couldn't name. Asterisk, you don't seem like you're here for the party either. I said, asterisk. He turned, slow and deliberate, like he'd heard my voice before. A half-smile tugged at his mouth. I'm not you, asterisk. I shook my head. Needed a break from the real world. It's asterisk. He tilted his bottle toward mine, and we clinked without another word. For the next hour, we talked not about where we were from, or what our majors would be, but about the kinds of things you only tell strangers. He told me he didn't believe in fate, but believed in timing. I told him I didn't believe in permanence, but craved something real anyway. Asterisk, there was something familiar about him, like meeting someone from a dream you'd forgotten. His laugh was quiet, sincere. His eyes didn't wander. He listened with a kind of intensity that made it hard to lie. Asterisk, eventually, the party began to dissolve behind us. People were leaving or falling asleep in cars. The fire had burned low. He looked at me with a question he didn't voice. Asterisk, I didn't answer it out loud. I just nodded. Asterisk, we walked away from the beach. Into the small cottage someone had left unlocked, probably rented for the weekend, and now empty. The air inside was warm with lingering sun, the floor gritty with sand. We didn't speak. Words would have broken something delicate that pulsed between us. He kissed me like he already knew how I wanted to be held. I kissed him like I didn't want the moment to end. Asterisk, it wasn't just physical. There was a slowness to it, a weight that made the walls disappear. He traced my collarbone like it was a map. I caught myself memorizing the curve of his jaw, the soft hitch in his breath when I touched the back of his neck. When he whispered, "You don't have to leave in the morning?" I didn't answer. Asterisk, I should have told him my name. Should have asked for his asterisk instead. I waited until the first edge of morning slipped through the curtain, faint gray light softening the room. His back was to me, his hand still resting where it had fallen across my ribs. Asterisk, I got dressed slowly, each movement careful, quiet. My chest ached with something I didn't want to name. I wasn't scared of him. I was scared of what it meant to feel that much, that fast. I didn't leave a note, didn't look back. Asterisk outside, the world was still asleep. I walked barefoot across the sand, the wind cold against my skin, trying to convince myself it had. Meant nothing that it was just a night, just a body, just a dream I wouldn't have to remember. Asterisk, but even then. I knew I was lying to myself. Asterisk, and I didn't know it yet, but I had just ghosted the one person who would soon become impossible. To ignore asterisk, the hallway smelled like industrial cleaner in anticipation. I balanced a box awkwardly on my hip, the printed dorm number written in marker on the side. Everything about college was new: the campus, the faces, the chance to start fresh. I had imagined this moment for months. What I hadn't imagined was how quiet my thoughts would be as I stood in front of the door that marked the beginning of everything. Asterisk. Room 214. I shifted the box and pushed the door open. He was already there. Asterisk. The moment our eyes met, time folded in on itself. The boy from the beach. No. The man I had left sleeping alone in a stranger's bed stood in front of me with the same quiet confidence, his back straight, one hand gripping the handle of a duffel bag. Asterisk. He didn't look surprised. If anything, there was a flicker of something else. Recognition, disappointment, maybe even resignation. I couldn't read him. Asterisk. You've got to be kidding, I murmured. Shh, not meaning to speak out loud. Asterisk. He arched an eyebrow, a humorless half-smile curling. His lips. Nope. Roommate lottery's got a twisted sense of humor. Asterisk. I set the box down harder than I meant to. My palms were damp. There were so many things I could have said. I could have apologized. I could have pretended not to know him. I could. Hev laughed and asked his name again. It's like we were strangers meeting for the first time. Asterisk instead. I said nothing. Asterisk, he went back to unpacking, his movements methodical. I watched his fingers smooth out the edge of his blanket, tuck the corners with practiced ease. He had the same quiet grace I remembered, the same quietness too, but this one was different. Felt distant now, not mysterious, guarded. Asterisk, I. Didn't know you'd I started, then stopped. Asterisk, he glanced up. Neither did I, but here we are. Asterisk, I sat on my bed, the metal frame groaning under the weight. Hey. My heart pounded like I'd just sprinted across campus. He hadn't asked me anything, not where I'd gone that morning. Not why I'd left without a word. He just let it hang there. Asterisk, which somehow has made it worse. Asterisk, the room was standard issue. Twin beds, 2 desks, 2 dressers, 1 window with a view of the parking lot. But it felt smaller now, claustrophobic with the weight of a night we had both pretended to forget. Asterisk, I spent the next hour pretending to organize my things, acutely aware of every breath he took. He didn't speak unless he had to. Quite excused me when reaching past me. A muttered thanks when I moved a box. Nothing more. Asterisk, I kept catching myself looking at him. Not just because he was still unfairly good-looking, but because the silence between us was screaming. I remembered the way his hand had fit against my skin, the way his voice had softened in the dark, and now he was a stranger again. One I had made. Asterisk, later that evening, when most of the dorm had emptied. Out to explore the campus or join orientation events, I returned to find him alone, sitting cross-legged on his bed, reading. A pair of earbuds rested in his ears. But he wasn't listening to music. His phone screen showed nothing playing. Asterisk, he looked up when I came in. I hesitated, halfway through the door. Asterisk, we should probably talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Asterisk, he pulled the earbuds out. About what? Asterisk, you know what? Asterisk, a beat passed. Do I asterisk? I swallowed. I didn't mean to disappear like that. It wasn't personal. Asterisk, he laughed, not kindly. You didn't know my name? How could it be personal? Asterisk there. Was no anger in his voice, just indifference. Like I was a story he'd already closed the book on? Asterisk, I just things got complicated. I wasn't ready for something like that. Asterisk. He looked at me for a long time, unreadable. Then he shrugged. You don't owe me anything. We were strangers. We weren't, and we both knew it. Asterisk, I nodded, even though his words felt like a door slamming shut. Asterisk, as I turned away. I caught the faintest flicker of emotion in his eyes. Something wounded, something raw. It vanished before I could name it. Asterisk, that night, I lay in my bed, the hum of the mini-fridge filling the silence between us. I didn't know what scared me more. The chance that he'd never speak of it again, or the chance that one day he would. Asterisk. The first few weeks passed in a rhythm of silent compromise. We learned to coexist, without crossing lines, spoken or otherwise. He claimed the left side of the closet. I stuck to the right. He liked the room cold. I wore sweatshirts. We shared space like strangers on a long train ride, aware of each other's presence, but refusing to acknowledge the shared history, tucked like a secret between our beds. Asterisk, his name. Yeah. Eventually learned through someone else, was Eli. Asterisk, it suited him simple. Unassuming, but with weight. I repeated it to myself at night like a confession. Asterisk, Eli made friends quickly. He had that quiet magnetism that drew people in without him having to try. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but people listened when he spoke. I watched him become part of study groups, late-night card games, and lazy Sunday breakfasts in the dining hall. I stayed on the periphery, unsure of my place in a world he seemed to navigate so easily. Asterisk, we barely spoke beyond necessity. When we did, it was clipped, careful. You good with the window open? Can I borrow your charger? Time's your class tomorrow? He never asked personal questions, never brought up the night on the beach. It was as if he had built a wall around that version of himself and decided I didn't deserve access. Asterisk, but silence has weight. The more time passed, the heavier it pressed between us. Asterisk, one night, I came back late from the library. The room was dark, save for the bluish glow of his laptop screen. He was watching something with headphones in, hoodie pulled over his head, a halo of lamplight catching the curve of his jaw. I moved quietly, but he paused his video and looked up. You okay? He asked, voice low. Asterisk, the question caught me off guard. It wasn't the tone of a roommate making small talk. It was the voice I remembered from that night, gentle, honest, unfiltered. Asterisk, I nodded, then hesitated, just tired. Asterisk, he nodded back, but his gaze lingered, and in that stillness, something shifted. After that, the silence softened. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was less guarded. I noticed the small things, the way he hummed while brushing his teeth, how he always made his bed like it was a ritual, how he twirled his pen when he was thinking. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me like he wanted to say something. Sometimes I almost did. Asterisk, then came the night I found him on the rooftop terrace behind the dorms. It wasn't an accident, Hyde, followed the faint sound of a guitar. A melody that tugged at something old and aching inside me. Asterisk, he was sitting cross-legged on a bench, strumming quietly, the skyline flickering behind him like a sigh. It didn't stop playing when he saw me, just kept his eyes on the strings. You play well, I said, stepping closer. Thanks. Asterisk, I didn't know you did music. Asterisk, you didn't ask, he said, then looked up. There was no bitterness in it, just truth. Asterisk, I wanted to, I admitted. I wanted a lot of things, asterisk. He stopped playing. His fingers hovered over the frets. Then why did you leave? He exhaled, the words I'd been burying, pushing their way out. Because I was scared. It felt like something real, and I wasn't ready for real. I thought disappearing would make it easier. Asterisk, he looked away. For who? The silence that followed was sharp, unforgiving. For me, I whispered, but it didn't. Asterisk, his jaw tightened. You didn't just ghost a hookup. You ghosted a person. Asterisk, I nodded, shame clawing at my chest. I know, I'm sorry. I've been sorry every day since. Asterisk, he looked at me, then really looked. And for a moment, the wall between us cracked. Asterisk, I can't pretend it didn't matter, he said quietly. But I also can't go back to being someone you only wanted for a night. Asterisk. I stepped closer. What if I want more now? Asterisk, he stood slowly, guitar still in his hands, eyes searching mine. There was no answer in them, just possibility and pain. Asterisk, I don't know if I believe you, said Asterisk. And then he walked past me, down the stairs, leaving only the echo of his footsteps and the unfinished chords of a song that sounded too much like regret. Asterisk. The days that followed blurred into a quiet purgatory. Eli didn't ignore me, he wasn't cruel like that, but he withdrew in subtle ways. No more late-night guitar, no shared silences. Just polite nods, and the mechanical rhythm of cohabiting with someone you're trying not to feel. His absence, even in the same room, was louder than any argument we could have had. Asterisk, I wanted to fix it, to explain again, but the words felt cheap after what I'd already said. Sorry had its limits. Regret couldn't rewrite the way I left him that morning, or undo the way I'd made him doubt his own worth. Asterisk, I started noticing the shift in myself more than in him. I woke up earlier, hoping to catch him before class. I stayed out less, choosing our rooms quiet over empty small talk at campus events. I stopped looking for other distractions. Nothing worked. Nothing filled the space he'd once stepped into so effortlessly. Asterisk, one Friday evening, a knock came at the door. Asterisk, it was Ava, a girl from down the hall who had become a regular fixture in Eli's growing circle of friends. She smiled at him in that way people do when they want more than just friendship. I watched from the desk as she leaned against the doorframe, twirling a strand of hair. Asterisk bonfire by the lake, she said, eyes flicking toward me, then back to him. You should come. Asterisk Eli hesitated. He glanced at me just for a second, then back at her. Asterisk, yeah, maybe, said. Asterisk had grinned and walked away, leaving behind a faint trail of lavender, perfume, and tension. Asterisk, I stared at my textbook, the words dissolving on the page. You should go, I said. Eli stood by the closet, tugging on a hoodie. I didn't ask for your permission. Asterisk, I know, I replied, forcing a small smile. I just think you'd have fun. Asterisk, he looked at me, arms crossed over his chest. Would it bother you if I did? Asterisk, I hesitated. Oh, yeah, I said quietly. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't. Asterisk, he blinked, caught off guard by the honesty. And for a flicker of a moment, I saw something in his expression and certainty. Maybe. Or something closer to hope. Asterisk, he didn't go. He stayed. Asterisk, we didn't talk that night. Not really. But we shared the silence again, the kind that wasn't cold. I sat at my desk pretending to read. He lay on his bed, phone forgotten beside him. The room was filled with the quiet hum of possibility. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A week later it rained, one of those heavy, relentless downpours that made the entire campus feel underwater. I came back soaked, shoes squelching, hair dripping. Eli was already in, dry and comfortable, lounging with a notebook in his lap. Asterisk, I closed the door behind me and sighed. I forgot my umbrella. Asterisk, he smirked. Rookie mistake. Asterisk, I laughed, breathless. It felt like the first real laugh I'd let out in weeks. Asterisk, he stood, crossed the room, and handed me a towel without a word. I took it, grateful. And for a moment, we just stood there, facing each other. No tension, no silence, just something tender and uncertain between us. Asterisk, I meant what I said, I told him, voice low. I don't want a redo of that night. I want to start from here if that's even something you'd consider. He looked at me, eyes searching. What makes you so sure I won't get ghosted again? He asked. Asterisk, I'm not. I admitted, but I'm here now. I'm not running this time. Asterisk, Eli nodded slowly. Then, without a word, he reached for his notebook and flipped it around. Asterisk, it was filled with sketches. Quiet moments he'd drawn from memory. A beach at night. 2 shadows by a fire. The curve of a shoulder. My silhouette sitting by the window. I looked up, heart pounding. You remember? I whispered. Asterisk, he didn't smile, but there was softness in his eyes. I tried to forget. Asterisk, I stepped closer, not daring to touch him. Do you still want to? Asterisk, he closed the notebook, setting it gently on the desk. Then he looked at me truly, looked and shook his head. Asterisk, no, he said quietly. What? This time, don't disappear. Asterisk, I won't. Asterisk, and for the first time since that night, we stood in the same space, not as strangers, not as a mistake, but as 2 people finally choosing each other. Asterisk.